This is Political Core, the non-PC edition of The Aaron Cruz Show, where you decide the topics. The only place where you get the news you want from the people you trust. We are your balanced and accurate information resource.
Hello and good evening and welcome to the Aaron Cruz Show, coming to you from Palm Springs, California. This is Political Core. I am your hostess, Aaron Cruz. Thank you for joining me. Tonight's topic is a tough one. Many of you know that New York City has been hit by a terror attack once again. Tonight's show is entitled, it's very difficult to talk about. It's entitled Islam in America, Repeat Terror in New York City. We're going to talk about how to fight the root cause. All right, we're going to discuss this and a bit more. Also, we're going to do a little bit of an update on some of the other policy issues. So, if you've been watching your TV, you may have come across one of the more difficult issues to discuss, which is some of the it's heart-wrenching, the loss of life on our streets at the hands of terror. And it's not just any terror. It is Islamic terrorism. Okay? And it's a serious issue. It's hit our soil. It's not unique by any means, and it's rampant, unfortunately. And so we're going to discuss this. Now, I want to bring up an important issue that I see going on right now in terms of the story that's coming out of New York. We see a lot on what different people have been weighing in, which is, seems to be common. Everybody wants in on the hot topic of the day. No one is really giving the president any sort of recognition on is the root issue here. So I'm going to go over what has happened in New York in case you have just been busy. It's Halloween. I understand many of you are mothers and fathers or aunts and uncles, sisters, brothers, out doing trick-or-treating or celebrating in some other way, or might just be with family. If you're unaware, basically what happened is a person, a 29-year-old male from Florida, whose name I admittedly cannot pronounce. I will spell it for you. And it's so sad. He essentially drove into a bike path and just plowed person after person after person with a rented U-Haul truck. And it's just one witness said that they saw 30 to 40 bikes just thrown about, and then he pulled out into traffic and he slammed into a bus, injuring two adults and two children. Thank goodness there weren't more people injured. Unfortunately, we did have a loss of life. Today we've lost 8 people and at least 11 more injured enough so that they were reported injured. Now, as we've talked about many times before with Islam and terror, the terror isn't just the lives lost and the families impacted or those injured physically. The terror is in the hearts and hands of the witnesses, the people who are impacted emotionally from viewing, witnessing, bearing witness to this sort of attack on our American soil and to our American people. And so this fear that's trying, to be struck into the hearts of man, our citizenry, is just horrific. And so there are many more victims here than just the 8 who lost their lives and the 11 who were injured. The first responders also are traumatized, and thank God we have those kinds of people who can respond in a moment's notice to help out, and also the people on the ground who helped out as well. What happened was this person, and again, I can't even pronounce his name. He's apparently a citizen, and his last name is spelled Saipov. He's 29 years old, a citizen of Uzbekistan, who lives in Florida. Okay? And apparently the police have not yet officially named him, according to CBS. Okay? Not only did he plow into multitudes of people, unsuspecting Americans who were on their bikes and traveling and going about their business of today at 3:05 p.m., not only did he do that, when he exited his car, he uttered those famous words, and I don't even want to say them. I don't even want to give any sort of credence to what these horrific barbarians are doing and going about across the globe. It's not even just in America. We, as American citizens, aren't the only victims here. It's pretty much, when it comes to Islamic terrorism, it comes down to Islam, really, and their war against the infidel. Now, I'm sure there are many people who are shrugging their shoulders, saying, "Oh, I know Muslims. I know some people who go to mosque. They're good people. I'm not saying all Muslims are bad. I'm just saying that Islam, in itself, in its own right, from its foundational core and basis, it's not a religion. It's an ideology. We've gone deep into this before, and I've gone into it on my blog, Merit of Truth, blogspot.com, and you can feel free to look it up. The fifth pillar of Islam it's a war component, and essentially Islam, you're obligated to fund jihad. That's just what it comes down to at a very basic, fundamental level, and so there are people throughout the globe who fund that fifth pillar of Islam, that war component, which not only is just to expand the scope and reach of Islam itself as a self-touted religion and its reach, it's also to fund jihad. Okay? I'm not sure that there's any other religion which has that, quote unquote, a religion, an actual religion, which holds that same element. Okay? I know many religions reach out to people and, in furthering their faith and whatnot, but as far as the war component goes, Islam is the most blatant of them all. So now when we look and we go back, okay, to this situation, this dire situation in New York City, we see, okay, that I call him Kumo the Commie. We see that the governor has spoken out, and he's called this terror. Okay, it's more than terror. All right, De Blasio basically said, okay, that's the mayor, and Cuomo is the governor. Okay, De Blasio said, based on the information that we have at this moment, this was an act of terror, and particularly cowardly act of terror, that targeted unaware civilians. This attack was intended to break our spirit, but we also know that New Yorkers are strong, New Yorkers are resilient, and our spirit will never be moved by an act of violence, an act meant to intimidate us. All right? And so that was his statement. And that, for him, is a pretty strong statement. Now, Kumo, the commie, I mean both of them pretty much are, had similar things to say. He said, left the house this morning. They were enjoying a beautiful west side of Manhattan on a beautiful fall day. They are not going to return, and the shock and the pain is going to be very real. Okay, and he's talking about, the victims. And I hear this sort of sentiment from these two individuals, and I think, they're really reaching out about the strength of the community and how they aren't going to allow this sort of act to intimidate. Well, that's not enough in my book. As an American citizen, I feel it's the responsibility and the duty of the government. I mean, they are supposed to be, I guess you would say, yes, we want to reduce the size and scope of government, but in terms of the money we provide to them for national security, for protecting the citizenry from these sorts of infiltrators, they should be doing far more. Far more. And we're just not seeing that right now. We aren't seeing that right now. I mean, not at the levels which we are paying for, really. So, de Blasio promised New Yorkers would see more police. Okay? I'm just not sure that a few more police through the next few days, ramped up protection, okay? I'm just not sure that that's the answer long term. It's not. I mean, basically, when we look at the issue, the deep root of the issue, the bigger issue is this. The governor, mayors, they should be working tighter with Homeland Security and other individuals to make sure that these types of people are not let within our borders. Period. End of story. Okay? I really, you know where I stand on this. I mean, if you've followed me for some time, for over the last 10 years, I've talked about this. If we're going to be providing the levels of payments that we are to the federal government, they need to protect us. They need to provide that deterrent. They need to be screening the individuals more closely and ensuring that these types of people do not get both feet on our soil. Now, that goes back down, if we want to look at it, this goes all the way back, and I feel strongly about this, and we've talked about this as well before, is the Pulse nightclub shooter, if you will. Okay? This individual had been looked out before. So, it's not a new thing, all right? Islam within our borders, I mean, it's been here. Okay, we've had many Muslims here. We have, I want to say, 2.6% Islamic population here in the United States, roughly, and not substantiated by the census yet, but I'm telling you, we've looked at that before as well. We have just under 3%. Some numbers put it more at 1.75%, but I've looked at it, it's just under 3% Islamic population. And for the number of people who are here, okay, there's no reason why we shouldn't have adequate information which tracks these people close enough to ensure that we are protected from those which may be, quote-unquote, radicalized. Now, I know that there are people out there are patriots who believe that Islam has no place in America at all whatsoever, 100%. Now, I hesitate to say that isn't the case. I will also say that I think, and I truly believe that there are good people who are Muslim, okay, who aren't bad. Who are misled by the cult, if you will, and believe that they're doing the right thing in following the faith. And I don't believe that they understand the true tenets of Islam. and they're completely whitewashed. They're I guess what you would equate to a secular type Christian. Okay, they believe in God, but they really don't do much about it. You know, they may pray at dinner here or there, but that's about it. Okay, so to say every Muslim in America is bad is just naive. But to say Islam has no place in America, well, I would have to agree in terms of barbaric and fundamental, and I guess if you would call it orthodox Islam, that would be the case. Their goal is to eradicate the infidel, convert or die, essentially. And you may think that that's extreme. Well, it is, and that's what they believe. So, and that goes back to one of the reasons why so many people are adamant that individuals from these third world nations who are, if you want to talk about Islam, and the way one priest looked at it, and it was very interesting. He said, it's important to differentiate between refugees and economic migrants. Okay? And I think that that's so true, because there are people who are migrating because of the economy, and who are moving because of maybe fear, and they don't have any jobs, and they need food and shelter and other things, and they're Muslim and basically Muslims who are moving into other outward nations from Syria and other places. So then you also have the refugees who are seeking protection from affliction and potential life loss. Okay, and these individuals, unfortunately, who come from these third world nations, all right, these individuals who come from these third world nations and have religious faith, if you want to call it religion or faith, in Islam, are many of them extremist in nature. Meaning, the difficulty is their culture is so different. Okay, the dynamics of their homeland are different than westernized nations, and when you try to take somebody out of this third world situation where women are treated worse than dogs, okay, and you try to take them out and you put them in a nation where women are equal to men, you might have a recipe for disaster. And in the case of the United States and individuals that have migrated elsewhere and then immigrated to the United States, legally or illegally, you could also have a recipe for disaster. I know even Canada has seen difficulty in its borders from Islamic, if you want to call it extremism. I almost want to call it normalcy, because in many Islamic states, now that's another thing that we can talk about right now. Islamic State. What is an Islamic State? Do you know what an Islamic State is? Because when you think of Islamic State, what's the first thing that comes to your mind? ISIS, right? What is the first thing that comes to your mind? ISIS. No. Islamic State is not ISIS. And you may say, okay, Islamic State, ISIL. Oh, Islamic State, Libya. Oh, yes. No. Now, what I would like to get to is that this Islamic State is a type of, and this is the definition, okay? And many people are not even going to agree, but it is what it is, and I think it's important we face what the Islamic State is, because it's not just ISIS, IS. It's not just Syria, and it's not just Libya, okay? ISIL. No. The Islamic State is essentially type of government, and I'm going to pull this out of Wikipedia because I think that anybody can look this up. You can research a little more. This is so topical. Whether you find it applicable or accurate is almost irrelevant, because if you can't think for yourself and really see with common sense Islamic State for what it is, we have a serious problem. Okay? And so Wikipedia says an Islamic State is a type of government primarily based on the application of Sharia Islamic law, dispensation of justice, maintenance of law and order. Okay? Well, if you look down a little bit more, and that's because I really want to kind of just look at this because it's important to recognize now that I don't believe, if we really want to shine a light, okay, on Islam and the problem that we're having, which is what I wanted to talk about in the United States and around the globe, I think it's important to recognize what the problem is. And one of the problems that we have is this Islamic State, okay, Islam, okay? It's a big issue. Now, I mentioned to you earlier about Islam and the 5 pillars of Islam, and it having a war component, which is the 5th pillar of Islam, and how Islam is not just, it's not a religion. It's a state of government, really. I mean, if you get to the certain point where you look at some of these nations, and you look at the structure of their society, okay, you can call the leaders, the kings, or whomever, whatever you want, but the entire structure of their government is surrounded by, engulfed in, and completely founded on Islam. Now, some may argue that Saudi Arabia isn't an Islamic state. Well, it's difficult. You can look at the history and you can look at all the ties and all of that if you'd like. But look at Iran and look at Pakistan, okay? Now, when we look at Pakistan and we look at India, now, when we look at Pakistan and we look at India, I think it's important to make a distinction here. Many Indians, okay, fled Pakistan. Pakistan is pretty much an Islamic state. There's a really, really, really difficult push, I think, for the people, the Indians, who breached that border in terms of their history, okay, and their familial ties. And Iran is also an Islamic state. The struggle I have is not so much with those who practice a faith, hold certain beliefs to be true. The issue I have is with the fundamental tenets of Islam being convert or die, essentially. And some of the behaviors which are allowed under the guise of religion or faith, one of those is female genital mutilation. And unfortunately, we have seen within our borders of the United States of America a rise in the push for, FMG, okay? And that's robbing a woman, of a girl, of her bodily parts and functions when she becomes a grown woman. And at its core, this is one of the things that Islam is okay with. And it's just so wrong. One of the other things that Islam pushes is basically there is no equality of women. The persecution and the oppression of women is vast. One of the things we've also seen in Saudi Arabia, which I am voicably pleased to hear, is they have made efforts and strides to allow, and this is one issue, I hate that word, allow women to drive, okay? Now, what I would like to see would be full equality of women. You know, they don't accept women as equals to men. They just don't. And I've talked about this before as well. My late husband went to Saudi Arabia and he reported back to me what he had seen. And it's, while it is a very family-oriented society, and on campuses in Saudi Arabia, women are let to not wear, hijab or head coverings. They're not made to or forced to. He was unclear whether or not that was just for show or that indeed was how culturally accepted women were within the university campus. There are many, many things that he shared with me about their culture, which I won't go into now. But I will say that it appears that Saudi Arabia is making a slow and well-gated kind of transition towards a more, I don't know if you want to call it normalized and balanced, westernized, focused society. They're certainly moving toward allowing more flexibility for women. Now I'd like to see utter and full equality of women, and the right for women to wear what they'd like and go where they would like without men, and that is not the case in Saudi Arabia. And it goes deeper than that. The cultural implications for women do go more deep than just what you wear and where you can go. But that's all I'll touch on as far as that's concerned. But if we go back to the Islamic State and we look at the reach of Islam into America, okay, via either refugees or even legal immigration into our state, we have to look at the issue here and call it for what it is. There are a large number of individuals who come to the United States, okay, who are Muslim and pose a threat and are not watched appropriately. And if we look at, say, there are a few outward political figures, which I won't name, but there are a few out there who speak out and push CARE, and they push all sorts of Muslim organizations. And there's one particular football player who's had a hard time getting a job and made a stand on our football field. And I would have to say that these are the influences that are more subtle, okay, that are waging a war against our American family and our American culture as we know it. And it's not as robust, and it isn't killing people, okay? But what it's slowly doing is it's eroding our culture, our fundamental American value system slowly. It's eroding. It's eroding at our youth slowly. And it's not okay. It's not okay. We have to stand up to these individuals who push back against the freedoms which we hold so dear here in America. Okay? And I would say it's killing us softly. We have those who are waging war on our streets, like in New York City, and then we have those who are waging a mind war on our American population. through our TV sets and through the media. And unfortunately, the media isn't helping. Okay? So as we look at today's event in New York City, I've seen a lot of different people come forward and make comments about what has happened. One of the people that was strongly bashed for coming forward was Donald Trump. Now, it wouldn't be for what you think at all. Really, it wouldn't be. If you look at what Donald Trump said, he got right to the root issue, which I think is so vital. Okay, he did. He got right to the root issue. And I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to pull this up. Donald Trump said, "We must not allow ISIS to return or enter our country after defeating them in the Middle East and elsewhere. Enough." Now, what does that, he said that at 3:31 p.m. Okay, and one thing I'd like to say about this is it's the Islamic State. It's not necessarily ISIS or ISIL, okay? I mean, we talked about that just a few minutes ago. But he gets right to the root issue there. He's basically saying, look, we can't allow these individuals who want death to America, death to the infidel, in our borders. And I think that should be a sound and strong voice to not just our nation, but to many nations about Islam and its objective against the infidel. Their obligation, their duty as practitioners of Muslim faith, of Islam, is to convert or kill. That's just what it is. I'm not trying to scare you. I'm not trying to bring fear to you. If you have a Muslim friend, they're probably not trying to kill you. But those people who are coming here from third world type nations, from barbaric nations who have and hold the beliefs and teachings from young children, I'm going to tell you, those thoughts, those trainings, those learnings are hard to shift. You don't just bring them to westernized nation and expect them to assimilate quickly and automatically. Okay, so what I think and what I believe from Trump, is President Trump, and what I see from him addressing this issue is not disassociative or kind of pulling back from the bigger issue or the smaller issue, whatever way you want to look at it, of New York going through something that's really quite difficult in the loss of their citizens and our fellow Americans. It's not that at all. It's not that he's not trying to, say something sensitive. First of all, there's a lot that goes into this. The media is so quick to pull information and talk about the details. As we look at, we can look at Las Vegas shooter issue and shooting and tragedy and see what the media has wrought, literally wrought. Disinformation, misinformation, the wrong story, changing stories, giving us information that was not accurate. Let's just take a breath. Let's let the leaders and the people in charge get the information they need. Give us a statement. Let us know what's going on. Let the families, loved ones know where they're at, and all of these sorts of things before we jump to conclusions. And I think what Donald Trump was doing President Trump was doing was taking the relevant information that he was given, which is obviously about the perpetrator who had carried out the attack, and reporting to the American people that we can no longer allow Islamic State to carry out its acts on our people. not after fighting for a dozen years or more in the Middle East. Enough is enough. And I commend him for making that statement, actually. And I say so on my blog, and I'm saying so right now. And one of the other things I wanted to talk about was not just that Donald Trump said something, his wife also said something a lot more, I guess, soft and addressed the issue. And I think that's entirely appropriate, and I'm glad that she came out with a statement. I say I a lot. Recognize it's not so important what these public figures say as much as it's important what they do or what they don't do. Because as we've seen with Cuomo, as Kami the Cuomo, and as we've seen with de Blasio, we've seen them say a lot. In not so many words, say a lot and do little to protect their people. And this is where I see Donald Trump is different. He does put out his blasts on Twitter. It's great he does, because then we can all keep kind of in tune with what's going on with the White House and other things. What he says or doesn't say, he takes action. And that's what I'm liking to see in our president, is he's not leading. We are no longer leading from behind, if you want to call it. That's what Obama was accused of doing, was leading from behind. We're no longer in that space, thank goodness. We're taking action, and that's important. Okay. Now, I really want to touch, I don't want to pull away too tightly from what's important here in terms of New York. But I think it's important to also talk about our policies here in the United States and some of the things going on throughout the country. And I know pretty much our senators and our congressmen, our representatives, they have been on overdrive in terms of what they've been trying to accomplish in Congress. I was looking at, and I'm going to go ahead and pull it up, and I'm going to put it in the notes. Let me do that right now while we're here. Give me just a moment. Let's see here. I was looking yesterday, or I think it might have been the day before. I was looking actually at some of the latest actions through Heritage Action, and hopefully, I know I encourage everybody to sign up and become a Sentinel if you can, or if you're interested in Heritage Foundation. If you're familiar, go to heritageaction.com and sign up to become one of their Sentinels. They basically hand out and provide information on healthcare reform, on the different on the Hill issues that are taking place in Congress about various topics, not just healthcare reform. One of the items that they brought up again was the Export-Import Bank, and I think it's important to mention because, if you recall, the Export-Import Bank basically was supposed to be a temporary thing, and we had hoped that it wouldn't continue on, and unfortunately it is. Okay, and there's also push, okay, for more board members, and I'd like for everybody to take a look at this, because it affects you. Whether you think it affects you or it doesn't affect you, it affects you, and it's far-reaching. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and read you the letter that Heritage Action sent okay, in support of former Rep. Scott Garrett's nomination to lead the Export-Import Bank to Senate Banking Chairman Mike Crapo. Okay, and I think it's important to read this letter because it'll give you kind of an idea of the Export-Import Bank and what it takes care of and what it doesn't, and where things are going with it. Okay, and I'm going to have to read it quick because we're almost at the end of our show. So, dear Chairman Crapo, we urge you and your fellow committee members to support the nomination of former Representative Scott Garrett, PN 673, to serve as president of the Export-Import Bank, Exim Bank of the United States. To be clear, we do not believe the Export Bank needs additional board members. However, if the Trump administration insists on refilling the board, then the committee should confirm a reform-oriented leader, and Mr. Garrett is perfect for that job. In 2013, you asked former Exim Bank Chairman Fred Hochberg what steps it would take to mitigate the tension between the bank's support for export transactions and adverse impact to the domestic companies. It was an insightful question and one we hope the committee will remember in an upcoming hearing. As the American Action Forum, which supports the bank, argued in 2011, export financing merely redistributes jobs across the economy rather than create more jobs overall. Similarly, in a 1981 Congressional Budget Office report that explains subsidized loans to exporters will increase employment in export industries, but this increase will occur at the expense of non-subsidized industries. The subsidy to one industry appears on the other industry's books as increased costs and decreased profits. As many of your fellow committee members previously noted, the Exim Bank needs additional reforms to better address waste, fraud, and abuse. The Trump administration agrees that the bank is in serious need of reform, and Scott Garrett is the one to do it. We urge the banking committee members to ignore pressure from the business community to defeat Mr. Garrett's nomination to lead the bank. President Trump ran for and won the presidency by promising Americans he would drain the swamp, and rightly said the Exim Bank was little more than feather bedding for a few companies. We can do very well without it. As noted above, one company's feather bedding is another company's government-imposed competitive disadvantage. Mr. Garrett understands these economics and the president's desire to make America great again, and he deserves to be confirmed. Sincerely, Michael A. Needham, Chief Executive Officer, CC, the Vice President. Okay, and it goes on. So this is the thing. It is a once not needed area of government is now being ushered in yet again, and hopefully we'll be able to get somebody in there that's going to be able to kind of hollow it out, if you will. And so we say it's almost Thanksgiving. We're going to jump to the other, which is tax reform and healthcare reform. There have been little amounts of progress on both fronts. And we suggest, as always, like we always do, in every single show, we say call Congress. 202-224-3121 is the phone number. Again, Congress phone number is 202-224-3121. Please call them. Let them know what you think about healthcare reform and tax reform, what they mean to you, and what you want to see, because I'm going to tell you what, nothing is getting done, and it's not Trump's fault. You need to look at Congress. And in order to do that, you can go to house.gov or senate.gov. Those are their websites. You can look up your members of Congress. You can also look up other resources on my website, which is aaroncruz.com, or send emails and inquiries to info@aaroncruz.com. Be sure to like me on social media. As always, we want to grow together to find common solutions, to find common ground. I'll answer any questions you can. Thank you again for joining me for Political Core and the Aaron Cruz Show. God bless you and God bless America.
To hear more and to learn more on how you can make an impact or about Political Core and the Aaron Cruz Show, visit us online at aaroncruz.com. That's ERI.